ask you a question. Have you ever needed money? I mean, truly needed money. Have you ever done without something? Have you ever had to tell your children no because you simply couldn't afford something? Have you ever craved power to get the money? Now, when I say power, I'm not talking about like to rule the world. But maybe in modern times, power looks more like a promotion or a higher position in some club you're a part of. So what do you do when this happens? Well, most of us work harder, put in more hours. You go above and beyond to get what you want. And when you finally reach that goal and your fortunes seem to change, you feel amazing. And why? Because you earned it. It's the age-old lesson. It's instilled in us as children. If you work hard for something, you appreciate it more. So how many times have you told your children that very thing? I can't get you that game system and just give it to you because you want to appreciate it. You want to take care of it. But let me ask you this. What if you were handed the office of the Pope? You think it would be different? You think maybe you would cherish it more? You're supposed to be the leader of a church. You're supposed to be the moral compass of the world. So if you were just given the papacy, would it matter more? Let's find out. Because we're going to talk about Pope Benedict IX. Now, Pope Benedict IX is born of power. He's the typical spoiled brat that we think of. I swear to you, he's the King Joffrey of this story. Benedict IX is the living embodiment of King Joffrey. See, he was for sure a terrible person. And some of what we're going to talk about has, through the ages, been argued that it was just people saying bad things about him because they didn't like him. But I assure you, either way, he's a bad pope. Now, when I say born of power, here's what I mean. Let me set the stage a little bit. It's been 50 years since 50 plus years actually, since our last bad pope, John the 12th. Yeah, our good old buddy Octavian is long gone. The Holy Roman Empire is in effect. Rome is a turbulent place. There are all kinds of noble families scratching and clawing by any means necessary to gain more power. But at 50 plus years removed, some of the names stay the same. And as always, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And in the Holy Roman Empire, this is very, very true. So, Pope Benedict IX is born in 1012. He is born as, and I'm going to butcher his name, Theophylactus of Tusculum, Rome. Now, he's not born to sexy scandals like John 12, and his early life is relatively normal for all intents and purposes. Which begs the question as to why he became a terrible pope. Okay, so when I said that Pope Benedict IX had a normal life growing up, I may have left out a small detail. See, Benedict was the nephew of 3 popes. and a child of the Counts Kardashian, like we talked about in the last episode. And at this point, they are for sure one of, if not the most powerful family in Rome. And yeah, you know where this car crash is going. And just like me, you can't turn away. He's actually the grandnephew of our old friend John the 12th. He comes from the stock of winners, just like old Octavian. But wait, there's more. Because he's the nephew of Benedict VIII, which explains the name. And he's also the nephew of the current Pope at the time, John the 19th. All of which come from Count Kardashian clan. Because you see, when Octavian's dad got him elected Pope, the Counts of Tusculum treated the papacy the same way the Kardashians treat ETV. They got in and they refused to go away. So Benedict IX is a nephew of a total of 3 popes, comes from one of the most powerful families in the Holy Roman Empire, and they kind of control the papacy at this point. So growing up, being Pope wasn't on his radar. It wasn't something he was going to have to work for sure. And it was kind of a foregone conclusion that he would be in the running. And he for sure was. See, even though 2 of the popes before him came from the same clan, they were, for all intents and purposes, okay. I mean, they did things people didn't like, but for the most part, they were alright. And the Romans at the time kind of got used to this. Especially in comparison to John 12. And the Pope that I'm saving for later, of course. But they've gotten 50 plus years of normality out of the church. And they kind of need it because it's a very turbulent time in Rome. I mean, nobody's perfect, but the debauchery for sure has calmed down. Even if Rome hasn't. So, Pope John the 19th dies. And in the way that is tradition, the cardinals meet to elect a new pope. I'm totally kidding. John the 19th's brother shows up, which is Benedict's dad. He bribes everyone to elect his son the new pope. And I'd like to imagine the negotiations went something like this. I'll give you $100 to elect my son as pope. Your son's 20. And we know what happened the last time someone that young was elected pope. 150. Deal. Now, there are some who say that Benedict was 10 to 12 years old at this time, but for the most part, historians wipe that away and feel that he was 20. And we're going to go with that. And from what we know of the situation, that's about how it went. Even in the Middle Ages, if you had enough cash, you could have anything. Even the papacy. But imagine you're a Roman. Like, think if tomorrow you woke up and heard that the Pope had died. And imagine that by 5 o'clock you leave work, and when you get home to turn on the 6 o'clock news, the white smoke is billowing out, and East, West, Blue Apple Kardashian, whatever her name is suddenly wheeled out as the new Pope. Yeah, that feeling you just got, I have to believe that's what most Romans felt. But here we are. Benedict IX is Pope. And the world's waiting to see what he's going to do. And of course, he's going to be moral and righteous and kind and great, because that's what he's been raised and groomed for. And that's what the office says he should do, right? Not a chance. Now, I'm going to diverge here for a second because I want to read you some of the reviews of his papacy, just so you can get a feeling of how history looks back at this time. And keep in mind that while I read this, all of the things that I'm getting ready to talk about are a bigger picture. The murdering and raping that tyrants usually do, all that's still going on in the background at the time. But we're going to talk about a bigger picture. But first, here's some reviews. A German historian, who usually was pretty hard on popes, wrote that Benedict seemed as if a demon from hell in the disguise of a priest occupied the chair of Peter and profaned sacred mysteries of religion by his insolent courses. Another historian calls him a disgrace, and a pope later wrote that Benedict IX's rapes, murders, and other unspeakable acts of violence and sodomy were so vile and foul he shuddered to think of it. Kind of kills the whole, well, people were just writing hit pieces about him, huh? Now, obviously, this movie's going to be good. Well, sort of. See, there's not much written about what his actual deeds at this point were. Now, mind you, he's 20. Rome is a very, very turbulent place. And he's not really somebody to be crossed. He's a spoiled brat. He's always been given everything he wanted. And this is no different. But in Pope Benedict IX, we have a 20-year-old who's earned nothing. He didn't really want the papacy. His family shoved him into it. He's also, and this, I'm going to say this to kind of set a standard as to what's going on in the moment, but this really has no bearing on whether he's good or bad. But he's the first pope that we know of that was mainly homosexual. And that doesn't make somebody mad, but it's more of bad, but it's more of ironic. The church that at the time is putting people to death for being homosexual is being led by a man who's primarily homosexual. And you can make of that what you will. But whatever the case, Pope Benedict IX really starts to rile up the Roman people. And this is kind of the point where historians like to argue that Pope Benedict wasn't that bad. He was just more negligent and is a victim of circumstance. And at the time, we don't know much about what he's doing. And that part's true. We don't know a lot about what he's doing. But what we do know is what the people around him are doing. And we know that the people are fed up with the Counts of Kardashian. And many other factions and families are on the rise. Again, there's a lot of noble families are in and around Rome and around the Roman Empire that are rising up. They're scratching out their own plot of land. They're clawing for every little shred of power. The emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, he's busy trying to be the king of multiple lands. There's uprisings everywhere. He's fighting wars on all fronts. It's a turbulent time. But at the same time, the Roman people are fed up with Benedict. They've had enough. So in 1035-ish, and I say ish because the date's not perfectly clear, but the people of Rome get so riled up, they decide to launch an assault against Benedict. And this assault's not just to depose him. They want to kill him. That's the only way for this to end in their eyes. Now think about it. The man who the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire swears allegiance to, the head of the church, and they want to kill him. Now, the mob acts, and they run Benedict out of Rome. But Benedict kind of catches a break in 1036, because while he's out of Rome, he runs into the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, Conrad II. And Conrad's heard what's going on, and he kind of wants to see what all the fuss is about. And here's the break. You see, A, he has allegiance to Pope Benedict IX, and B, as with any dispute, the first person there to tell their side of the story, especially if the opposing side isn't around to defend themselves, that person usually comes out on top. And even back then in the Middle Ages, rulers knew how important controlling the narrative is. So with the power of the emperor, and let's be honest, the emperor's army, people don't really care who you hang out with. It's what power you have with that. Benedict heads back to Rome. Now, at this time, Benedict's really he's mainly having trouble, aside from nobility, he's having trouble with two particular bishops. And he'll deal with them. He's also having trouble with the Archbishop of Milan. So when he gets back on the chair, the first thing, of course, that he does is he expels the bishops. As for the Archbishop, who's really a pain in his side, we'll come back to him in a little bit. Now, at the time, we know that the emperor's on his side. A couple years later, though, the emperor dies, and he's succeeded by Henry III. Now, by this point, Benedict is really fed up with this Archbishop of Milan. And he's not acted on him yet, but it's coming. But Henry III goes on basically a press tour where he goes around and he shows off the fact that he's the new emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. He's the person everybody's going to have to deal with, and check him out. And along the way, he does meet the Archbishop of Milan, and is kind of cool with him. They have some problems in the beginning, but all in all, they're fairly cool. They kind of see eye to eye, as the Archbishop's known as a warring bishop. He's all about fighting and enforcing the laws by might. But Henry III carries on because he's got a lot of land to cover. He's a triple king, meaning he's the king of 3 different countries, as well as the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And remember, this isn't a time where he can jump on, Emperor Force 1 and be in every place within the hour. No, it takes time to move from place to place. And that's what Henry's doing. But Benedict knows that the people of Rome don't like him. I mean, they've gone so far as to try to kill him. And it's vital that he keeps the emperor, no matter who it is, on his side. And at some point in this, the Hungarians are giving the Holy Roman Empire a problem. They're becoming an issue, and the emperor is going to have to eventually address this. But Benedict makes a move of brilliance at some point, because he wants to get on Henry's good side. So he excommunicates the entire nobility of Hungary. All the noble families. All of them. And that's a problem at this time. If you're excommunicated from the Catholic Church, like, everybody was a part of the church, and they followed what the church said. If you're not deemed holy enough, or unworthy, or whatever, you're screwed. No one's going to deal with you. No one's going to help you. Your power is basically gone. And so, of course, when he does this, he wins some favor with Henry. And he continues to basically rule as he had. Henry kind of stays out of Rome and doesn't really get involved in anything. So he basically continues to rule for no problem, but he's becoming more and more wild and careless. And in 1044, the Roman people have had enough. They can't deal with this anymore. He's got to go. So they get him out, but this time they learn a lesson that they didn't last time. This time when they get him out, they immediately hold elections for a new pope. And they bring in a guy named John from Sabine, and they elect him pope. And they do so under the thought of the guy who doesn't seek the power should wield it. I mean, carrying on with our Game of Thrones metaphor, this is basically the ending of Game of Thrones. And when John is elected, John takes over as pope. He becomes Pope Sylvester III, and he thinks he's tall a putty tat. And he did. But the problem is, this isn't HBO. And to Benedict and the Counts Kardashian, this isn't a game. And life doesn't wait on George R.R. Martin to finish writing the true ending of the Last Thrones book. No. Benedict is coming back. And while there's probably some truth to the person who doesn't seek the power thing, but in reality, the one who wants it will do anything for it. It's kind of the Star Wars thing and the rule of the Sith. It's the rule of two. One person to embody the power and the other to crave it. And having had a taste of it, Benedict IX craves it. And he wants it more than anything at this point. And he's willing to do anything for it. So Benedict and his supporters and his family move on Rome. He wants the papacy back. And he's not going to stop till he gets it. It takes him 2 months. 2 months to send John back to Sabine. And Pope Benedict IX is back. But he has a problem. See, he's been run out twice. And he can't seem to get the emperor on the phone. And even worse, he's in love. Allegedly. There are whispers that he's in love at this point, and he wants to marry his cousin. And I told you last time, incest sells. Now, I want to be perfectly clear here. There's no definitive proof of this, or that this was the motivation for what he does next. So, take that with a grain of salt. Because this is truly the rumor of rumors. But what's not a rumor is that Benedict is questioning his power. And he's fairly certain he's not powerful enough to hold the office by force. He's not even sure he can hold the Lateran Palace, which is where the Pope lives. He makes up his mind at this point to abdicate the throne. But there are a couple things that make this more complex than just him packing up and leaving. Number one, he doesn't even know if he can do this. Is this something a pope can do? Number two, he's well aware that the people of Rome still want his head. So if he is going to leave, and that is something that he can do, he needs to do so in a way that he still controls the next pope. That way he can ensure that while the Roman people want his head, the next pope doesn't give it to him. So Benedict calls a meeting with his godfather, the archpriest John Gratian. And I'm going to butcher these names, and it's going to continue to happen throughout this series. So feel free to laugh, post nasty comments. Really, at the end of the day, I'm not Italian, nor have I lived in the Middle Ages. But he talks to his godfather, and he tells him that he's kind of changed his mind. The grass isn't greener, and he wants out. So the first thing they have to decide is, can he abdicate? Which his godfather tells him he can. Second, he wants his godfather to take the papacy. But nothing in life is free. So Benedict basically breaks down to his godfather that he wants him to have the papacy, but he needs to get paid. You know, he needs to get his beak wet at least a little bit. So he tells his godfather, for the sum of 1,000 pounds of silver, he can be pope. Oh, and one other thing. You see, Benedict, when he leaves, he doesn't want to have to worry about money. So he wants to take what is known as Peter's Pence of England, which was a tax that landowners paid into the papacy. So he wants that. Okay, so 1,000 pounds of silver and Peter's Pence, and Goddad gets to be pope. Quick and easy. Done deal. And John accepts. And this is the interesting thing about John. You see, John doesn't buy the papacy because he's power hungry. By all accounts, he's a very pious man. He follows the teachings of the church. He's a moral man. He's exactly what you would want a pope to be. And when he becomes pope, the members of the church kind of cheer it. They're glad, like, finally, we're back to what we say the pope is supposed to be. Because, by all accounts, he buys the papacy because he feels that morality and order needs to be reinstated into the church and into the people. You see, John believes that the church warring factions inside itself is what's spilling over into Rome and causing the same. The church is supposed to lead by example, and they're setting a terrible example. So, John feels that if we set a great example, the people of Rome would calm down. So he does this not for power, but because at the end of the day, he feels that his godson's a spoiled brat. He's been given everything. He's the King Joffrey, and his ass needs to go. And I realized as I wrote this that John's kind of the Tyrion Lannister of this story. Except for without the wine and the prostitutes. And probably a little taller. But he's making moves for the right reasons. He pays the cash, and he becomes Pope Gregory VI. But ultimately, no matter what Gregory VI's reasons were, the divisions and the warring, power-hungry factions were too much for what he tried to do. Now also, at this time, you still have Pope Sylvester in the wings, claiming to be the rightful Pope. Benedict is the Pope. Now we have Pope Gregory, who is acknowledged as the Pope, even though there was no election to make him Pope. And in this next area, I want to be very clear and I want to be very careful. There are rumors and speculation as to what Benedict does next. But the belief is that after he leaves, Gregory begins to reign, and Pope Benedict IX comes back. Apparently because he couldn't marry the person that he wanted for whatever reason, or he just missed the lifestyle, who knows. But apparently he comes back, and he informs Goddad, Pope Gregory VI, that he wants to be Pope. You see, Benedict IX can't seem to make up his mind. And it's showing. But Gregory's Pope, and apparently he continues to be recognized as Pope, even though Benedict's kind of running the show. Now, back to the Archbishop, of Milan. You see, remember when I told you that Emperor Henry III had met him and was kind of cool with him? Well, see, in the time that had passed, Benedict was tired of him, and the people of Milan had gotten tired of him, and at some point he had been imprisoned, but there was a question as to the lawfulness of his imprisonment, and he dies. And when he dies, the people of Milan are tired of the higher offices in the church being handed off to family members and noblemen and people of means. The regular man wants a regular representative. And they nominate someone. And when they do, Henry's kind of cool with this. Henry's okay with the people choosing who the next archbishop should be. But the Pope isn't. Excuse me. All three popes. Because all three popes, and this is my speculation here, but all three popes see the same thing. This starts to set a precedence. If the people choose who's going to become the next archbishop, and it's not going to be handed off or sold or done out of the back of a horse stable. If we're going to open the doors to the room where it happened, well, I mean, all bets are off. How high does this go? Do the people get to choose who they want as Pope? You see, those in power want to stay in power. So all three say no. And when this happens, along with the turmoil that's going on and the constant pleas of representatives of the church to Emperor Henry III, finally, Henry has heard enough. You see, all throughout this time, cardinals and bishops had been pleading for Henry to cross the Alps, which is a dangerous trek. But they want him to march into Rome and straighten all of this out. Because at this time, you now have three people claiming they're the rightful pope. And now, someone that he was cool with dies. The people elect who they want to be the Archbishop of Milan next. Henry is okay with it, but the papacy is saying no. So, hearing of all of this, being begged across the Alps, that's exactly what Emperor Henry III does. Now, Henry arrives in Rome in late autumn to early winter of 1046. He's had enough. He comes into Rome and immediately calls for a synod of Sutri. Now, a synod's basically a council. He wants a meeting. He wants a council set up with upper members of the church, nobility, whoever, but he's going to straighten all this out. Emperor Henry III straightens all this out in a week, and he does so starting December 20th, 1046. Now, the reason I gave you that date is because what's getting ready to happen here is kind of magical. You see, he calls for a synod. Sylvester and Gregory both show up to defend themselves. Of course, Benedict doesn't. Sylvester pleads his case as to why he's the legitimate pope. Henry is hearing none of it. He sends him to a monastery, and that's that. Now, Gregory, upon being questioned about the purchase of the papacy, fully admits that that's exactly what happened. He admits it. He states why. Now, in hearing all this, Henry compels him, let's say, to resign. And everyone agreed that Gregory had done this for the right reasons. But you see, it was the wrong way. He wasn't elected. And you can't just pay cash and be the Pope. You see, it turns out in Henry's eyes, you can't buy being Pope. Later that week, he deposes Benedict IX. There were 3, now there are none. Now, Henry hears out the synod. There's a choice made for the next pope, but the man who is put up as pope declines. He doesn't want any part of this. But Gregory, being the example of what a pope should be, Henry wants to stay kind of in that vein. So Henry, being smart, brought someone from Germany with him. And he puts him up as nomination. Now, when the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire puts someone up to be nominated as pope, you can bet that the cardinals are going to listen. And they do. They elect him. And he becomes Pope Clement II. And he's from Germany. And I point that out because to us that doesn't matter much in our story. But in the Holy Roman Empire, and in Rome especially during this time, that matters, and it becomes more and more of an issue. But Pope Clement II is now the undisputed Pope. Everything's set back in place. He proclaims Henry III Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And that's the final word. That's the end of our story. Almost. See, 9 months later, Pope Clement II dies. And seeing an opening, Benedict returns. But this time they're ready for him. German imperial authorities, because, you know, the emperor is German, are left behind and they're ready to put him down if he shows back up. So Pope Benedict IX retires to Tusculum, where the Count Kardashian clan's from. And how and why of his death are really kind of unknown. But there's some that say he died living in a monastery at an older age, and that he had repented and turned away from the things that he had done when he was Pope. And he died a humble man. Did he or didn't he? I don't know. I mean, what I do know is with age comes wisdom and self-reflection for sure. So who knows? Maybe he did. I mean, ultimately, I'm going to leave that for you to decide. And yes, there are a lot of people who point out that this was a turbulent time in Rome, and that every noble family who was anybody is jockeying for position, and people are trying to gain power. And how do you get on the scale, you know, on the upper scale? You dog the guy that's on top, and that gets you attention. And if you can provide people with an enemy, if you can provide them with the other, someone to blame for all that's wrong in their life, then that gains you status. And for sure, all of that's true. But when it comes to power, and when it comes to Benedict IX's power, I think we have to look at what he did with it. And ultimately, that was rape and murder and oppress. And he even sold the papacy. And to me, that kind of answers everything. And why did he treat it so poorly? Why was it not an issue for him to just sell it all? He didn't earn it. But again, how he died and what he did with his life in his final years, that's up for anybody's discussion and opinion. So what do you think that Pope Benedict IX did in his old age? Let me know. Otherwise, tune in next week as we take a look at a Pope who is so nuts that even Dante makes fun of him in the Divine Comedy. And as always, I thank you all so much for listening. The response to this has been great. It's more than I ever could have asked for. And we're going to keep cranking these out. If you're listening on YouTube, like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Buy some merch. All that jazz. Otherwise, be back next week. And until then, I'm David VanDyke. This has been Bad Popes. We'll see you next week.